All right, guys, welcome back to the Pocket Mads channel. It's Maddie here, and welcome back to Meta Monday, the weekly series where we analyze the Pokemon Pocket metagame and keep you guys up to date on everything going on in the competitive world of Pokemon Pocket. This past weekend was PMPT number 43, which was actually the fourth and final PMPT tournament of this B4 season. Now, the results this weekend are quite surprising. I assume a lot of you guys probably tuned into the live stream or maybe heard something about the results of this past weekend's tournament, but definitely sort of a surprising outcome, so I'm really excited to go through it and talk about it with you guys. Keep in mind, this is the last tournament of this season, and I always say here on the channel that, that the fourth week of these, different seasons that we get are sometimes my favorite. Typically, most people aren't... it's interesting. The popularity of the game in general and of the new cards, goes down, of course, as the month goes on. So there's less players, and I also think a lot of people are trying to squeeze in like the end of their ranked season, you know what I mean? So we had about 300 people compete this weekend, which is really, really cool. But what happens is towards the end of the season, people just sort of abandon a little bit more so, what like the top tier, standardized metagame looks like, and things become very spread out. And we oftentimes see some very interesting results at the end of seasons, and that's, I think, what happened here. So I'm really excited. This is going to be, again, the last Meta Monday of the season, but keep in mind that PMPT number 44 is this upcoming Saturday, and what's really cool about that is that this is going to be the first PMPT tournament of the next new season. So that's right, B4A, Team Rocket's Ambition, is set to release in just 2 days, which is really exciting, so we get to cover all of that on the channel, but PMPT number 44 will be a brand new metagame with all of the new cards included, which I am very, very excited about. So you're going to want to stay tuned for all of that. Link to register is down in the description below. We're going to hop on over to PocketMads.com, the greatest Pokemon Pocket website of all time. We're going to take a look at the results. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. Let's dive right into it, guys. Here are the final standings for PMPT number 43 this past weekend. That's right. Here we are, guys. Here we are. Okay, so, what is there to say? Golfer MT, one of the PMPT regulars, like, one of the top tier, I would say, competitive players in Pokemon Pocket, comes in at first place this weekend from the United States, and yes, he was playing Dedenne EX. So Dedenne EX is officially a Pokemon Pocket, PMPT champion, which is kind of crazy. Now, when we take a look at the other 4 decks in top 4, there's so much to talk about regarding this Dedenne deck. We'll get into it in a little bit. First of all, congrats to Golfer MT. It's crazy to say that Dedenne EX is a PMPT champion, whereas a lot of other, I guess, meta Pokemon are non-champions. They've never won PMPT before. Again, Mega Rayquaza hasn't won PMPT at all this season, so at least I don't think so. I don't think it has. Dedenne comes in. It has officially become champion. Shout out to Golfer MT as well. Just an incredible run. But yes, in second place, it's going to be Dr. Indigo from, it hasn't listed his country. He made it all the way to Grand Finals, and he was playing Vespiquen and Shuckle. So, I know that Vespiquen is definitely considered a top-tier meta deck, and to be fair, Dedenne has had some meta viability throughout the season, but I don't think anybody before the season released would have predicted that in the Grand Finals of a PMPT tournament, we would have Shuckle EX against Dedenne EX. I just don't think that's something many people, assumed was the case, but I'm really happy to say that that's what happened. And then in third place, we have Imp Yggdrasil, another top-tier player who's always at the top of the standings from France, of course, and he was playing Dark Hoopa. Now, for me, Dark Hoopa has been the number 1 deck so far this season, basically the entire season. The deck's incredible. No surprise that it kind of slides in here at top 4, gets third place. You got to keep in mind as well that, the metagame at this point is significantly different than it was at the beginning of the season, and there's a lot of room for innovation, and it's interesting. I know the months and the seasons for Pokemon Pocket are so short, but if they were to be longer, you'd probably see a lot more diversity towards the, as the seasons go on, and a lot more, kind of new or different decks popping up. But, just as things are starting to really get crazy here at the end of the season, we're going to be going into a new season in just a couple of days, and that's Pokemon Pocket for you. And in fourth place is going to be Eluquitas, fourth place from Peru, and he was playing Sleep Altaria. Now, this weekend was, in fact, I do think a great weekend for Sleep Altaria. Of course, it's a psychic type strategy. Not that many decks are playing Sleep Counterplay. It's something that ends up just sort of happening. Sleep Altaria hasn't been a dominant deck for quite some time. So, in Lucario being very popular as well, and this, of course, being a psychic deck, I do think Sleep Altaria probably had a pretty unique position coming into this weekend. So, he gets 4th place. Shout out to him. But also, we have Dexter Morgan, 5th place, Viltrum Dexter Morgan from the United States, and he was also playing Sleep Altaria. So, we've got 2 Sleep Altarias there in the top 5. 4th and 5th place. And if we get down to the other decks just outside top 4, we've got Batty 2 Sick, another player that just, is oftentimes at the high up in these standings, which is really cool. From the United Kingdom, and it's Mega Charizard. So Mega Charizard kind of finding its, top 8 finish here, which it does from time to time. I think a lot of people do realize that Charizard EX is certainly a very strong deck. But 6th place, shout out to him. Kind of one of the best fire type placements we've had at a PMPT tournament this whole season. And then it's going to be Crimson Ruby from the United States, who was playing Mega Sceptile, but it's that new, or not new, but I guess the revitalized version of Mega Sceptile, which has popped up towards the end of the season, which is going to be the Butterfree version, the evolution Caterpie, like Demon Worm, version of Sceptile, which is a really strong deck. And in certain matchups, in certain metagames, can easily kind of come in and be a very, very significant option. 7th place, shout out to Crimson Ruby. And then it's Brendan, who I think is one of the only 3-time PMPT champions. Shout out to him. In 8th place, also from France, and he's our highest placing Mega Lucario. So only 1 Mega Lucario, by far the most played deck this weekend, but also the most played deck of this entire season. The only Mega Lucario in top 8, and he is in 8th place. So congrats to him. Great run. But again, maybe not as well positioned of a deck as it was, later on. But shout out to Brendan. Now let's kind of just quickly brush over some of the decks that made it into top 16. We do have PGXL Atomico from Colombia, who is playing Altaria and Greninja, right? So not just those couple of Altarias there in top 5, but we do have several other Altarias, 3 more, in fact, in top 16. So Altaria was actually the most popular or the most present deck within the top 16, which again does signify to me what the meta landscape really looked like coming into this weekend. This is actually Altaria Greninja, which has been a significant meta deck for quite some time. It hasn't been that popular, but comes back here into the light. Shout out to him. 10th place is going to be Engar. Engar from Indonesia, also playing Sleep Altaria. So another Sleep Altaria, shout out to him. And then we have Flo from Germany, another Vespiquen and Shuckle EX. So Vespiquen in here, 2 different times here in top 16. So Grass in here 3 different times because of the Mega Sceptile deck. So Grass certainly still, showing out pretty strong. And then here it's actually going to be Morar Lentio, 13. I apologize for the name. From Romania. This is a player that I don't actually recognize. So this might be a new PMPT competitor, which is really, really cool to see. Shout out to him. Shout out to Romania, 12th place. And he's actually Blaziken Greninja. So this might be the best placement that we've seen all season at PMPT for Blaziken Greninja, if not one of them, which is pretty cool. And then we have Ons, or ANHG from Japan, 13th place. Shout out to him and anyone from Japan playing in PMPT tournaments because of the time difference. Pretty crazy. He was playing Hydreigon Absol, so, Hydreigon sneaking in here. Itachi, 1820 from Chile. Shout out to him, 14th place. Sleep Altaria yet again. So again, a really great performance this weekend from Altaria, drastically outperforming Mega Lucario, which is interesting to see, really for the first time, I would say, in a while. And then we have Nabrix, another PMPT champion. Shout out to him, 15th place, Suicune and Baxcalibur. So it wouldn't be a Pokemon Pocket tournament without Suicune finding its way into top 16. And then we have Fengar here from Ecuador, which is super cool. Fengar 99 was playing Turbo Mega Kangaskhan with Pichu in 16th place. So Mega Kangaskhan actually finding its way into top 16. So tons of diversity. We did have several different Altaria decks, 5 different Altaria making it in here to top 16, but lots of diversity. Not only did Dedenne EX get first place, but also keep in mind, and this is something I want to mention, Golfer MT in first place went 13-0. He went undefeated with Dedenne EX. And I'll say this right now, there's not that many times where the winner of PMPT also goes undefeated in Swiss. So you have a completely undefeated record. It really doesn't happen that often. I can't even remember the last time it did happen. So this is very, very impressive. 13-0. Absolutely an incredible performance from Golfer MT. And shout out to all these players, tons of diversity. We've got a lot of different types represented here, which I like. We've got, lightning, we've got psychic, we got dark, we got grass, we got fire, we got fighting, we have water, colorless as well. So basically everything other than Steel and Dragon, which is definitely an interesting thing to mention, or Mega Rayquaza and those Dragon-type decks, in the 4th week of the season, nowhere to be found here in top 16, which is definitely, a little bit sad to see, but very, very cool. In fact, I believe 2 different decks to win this season. So I think Vespiquen won twice. Did it win 2 weeks in a row? I almost forget. But yeah, Vespiquen and Dedenne are 2 brand new Pokemon that both won in their respective debut seasons, which is really, really cool. Really cool to see, which is, again, I think a really big upside to the diversity here in Pokemon Pocket. But anyway, guys, let's break down the deck lists. We'll break down the decks in top 8. And if you wanted to take a look at the decks in top 16, you can head on over to PocketMats.com. Let's dive right into it, and then we'll scroll up after all of that, and we'll go into the metagame data, because there's a lot of really interesting data and metrics that we're able to, pull basically from the tournament and show you guys there on PocketMats.com. All right, Golfer MT, first place deck list, Dedenne and Indeedee. Now, again, I am advertising this as a win for Dedenne EX, because it is, quite frankly. Realistically, though, and I got to zoom out a little bit so you can view the deck, realistically, this is also a win for Oricorio, okay? And that's an important thing to distinguish, right? This is a deck that does play double Oricorio, starting planes, giant capes, and Indeedee EXs, right? So, we've seen these types of decks before. The maximum sustain kind of tank Oricorio type decks have been extremely viable in the metagame. Now, the issue with that kind of Indeedee Oricorio strategy is that it's oftentimes hard to also play another Pokemon that can sometimes deal a lot of damage and take KOs where Oricorio can't. Now, what we've seen in the past is that these types of decks actually play something like a Giratina EX. And the reason you play Giratina is because it can power itself up and it can hit 130 damage, right? So it is sort of an ace in the hole type card to play, in this Oricorio and Indeedee strategy. But now Golfer MT, with some really, really cool sort of meta progression and I guess evolution of this strategy, playing Dedenne EX as that ancillary secondary attacking option or primary attacking option in the decks where, Oricorio isn't actually going to be that useful. And honestly, it actually does make a ton of sense to me. This is one of the more smarter things that I've ever seen. Keep in mind, Oricorio is very, very good at one thing, which is shutting down these incredibly strong and high HP, mega Pokemon or EX Pokemon, right? But Oricorio struggles into some of these lesser strong single prize non-EX Pokemon. Now, when you pair that with Dedenne EX, it's almost the opposite, right? Dedenne EX can't really stand up to something like a Mega Lucario, right? Or some of these Mega Pokemon that have a ton of HP and deal a lot of damage. But Dedenne EX is really, really good at absolutely exploding and being able to KO some of those non-EX Pokemon very effectively. So Dedenne EX and Oricorio actually complement each other extremely well. And I find that to be very interesting, right? So Giant Cape starting planes does bring Dedenne EX up to 140, 160 HP, which is still very KOable for certain Mega Pokemon. However, for non-EX Pokemon, there's really nothing in the game that's going to KO Dedenne. So when you pair them together, it actually ends up being very synergistic. And as we know, Dedenne EX does more damage based on how many tool cards are attached to all of your Pokemon. So that's why we're playing double Cape, double Small Balloon for retreat consistency. And then we're also playing a Clear Veil, which is going to be really nice into sleep strategies. And other strategies as well. And then we have Protected Poncho to keep that Indeedee safe. So this is a very, very smart deck list. Other than that, double Research, Pokeball, Copycat, and one Cyrus. So it's a very straightforward deck, but a very, very smart deck. I think a big reason why this deck won is definitely because of Oricorio, but I think Dedenne and Oricorio actually synergizing well, extremely well. And I find that to be so cool that in the last PMPT tournament of the season, a deck like this can come in and in fact end up winning. Some people don't love it when Oricorio comes in and has a really dominant performance. To me, I personally think that if Oricorio is substantial in a metagame and it is a competitive option, that's a really big deal, and it's actually a really healthy thing for the meta because it forces decks to be a little bit more flexible in how they're building their strategies, right? And I find that to be interesting. The other thing you want to keep in mind is that this player did, in fact, throughout this entire tournament, only hit one Mega Lucario. And that's the case for tournaments oftentimes. You need a little bit of bracket luck. You need a little bit of matchup luck. And of course, there might have been a little bit of that for Golfer MT. Now, he went 13-0, so he did beat that Lucario player, but maybe in another world, he hits 4 or 5 Lucarios, and it's a different outcome. But this weekend, 13-0, undefeated Dedenne EX, doing what almost no Pokemon has really ever done in the history of Pokemon Pocket, which is super, super cool. Here's the code, guys, if you want to try this out. Keep in mind, I don't think this is something that is, a clear, like, #1 deck to be playing from here on out for the next couple of days. Now, the ranked season is going to wrap up soon. Now, this might be a decent option. Like I said, it is one of those flash in the pan type things. It's like a Cinderella type run. Now, it's definitely a strong deck list, but I wouldn't expect to play this on the ranked ladder and go 13-0. That's just not something that's likely going to happen. It's also an Oricorio deck, so you got to keep in mind sometimes when you play Oricorio decks, they're not necessarily like the most consistent things in ranked, right? With the higher diversity, but really, really cool. There's the QR code. Scan that up, guys. Enjoy that. Shout out to Golfer MT, one of the cooler tournament placements we've ever had at PMPT, and it's really, really fun to see. I love the 4th weeks of the seasons. Next up is going to be Dr. Indigo. Dr. Indigo playing Vespiquen and Shuckle. Now, not playing Pheromosa, not playing Kartana, right? And that's something that you got to understand about, the current metagame. Over the last couple of weeks, how much has Oricorio really been a significant factor or a threat? Right? I think most people would consider that it's really not. And in the game right now, in Pokemon Pocket, in the current meta, not only do you have to be accountable for those sleep type strategies, so you want to play the sleep counters, but then you also have to play counterplay to Oricorio, right? So it's like, at the same time, like, how are we really building a deck as strong as it can be while also having to factor in negating sleep and status conditions and Oricorio? So it's like, it's a really interesting thing in the metagame, and I think that it's a really healthy thing, honestly, for the metagame. But yes, Vespiquen, still one of the best decks across this entire season. I put it 2nd or 3rd. Keep in mind, the only cards you would ever play in this deck that can get around Oricorio is like Kartana or Pheromosa, but Indeedee, Starting Plains, Giant Cape, like you're just not even going to be able to get through the Oricorio. So there's really nothing in this deck that you would play. Now, there is the non-EX Vespiquen, which I think hits for 70, but even then, right, like a Starting Plains is a Giant Cape Indeed, he's going to live that, so, or Oricorio, rather. So, there are versions of Vespiquen that counteract or counterplay for Oricorio a bit better, but again, you got to understand, if you're playing those cards in your deck list, your deck is objectively less strong, in general, right? And again, Oricorio not being a significant factor, so a lot of people not really counterplaying for Oricorio, which is, again, why it went 13-0, I would imagine. But anyway, there's Dr. Indigo's deck, Vespiquen, Shuckle. I think this is a very, very strong list, again, for anybody that isn't necessarily concerned about Oricorio. And you got to understand, this player went to grand finals, right? So they had a great record. They went all the way through the tournament, and they ended up just having to, play an Oricorio Indeedee deck in grand finals, which is unfortunate. But in the grand scheme of things, I think this Vespiquen deck probably is a stronger deck than the Oricorio deck, right? It just comes down to matchups and whatnot. Playing one Sabrina, one Cyrus, double X speed. So very, very in tune here for leadoff consistency, which kind of leads to the pacing of this deck list, which I like. So double X speed, double Leaf Cape, double Forest, double Copycat, double Research, one Sabrina, one Cyrus, and then a Field Blower. Field Blower is such a good card, and it will continue to be a really, really good card. Tomorrow, this is a random tangent. Tomorrow's video, because I think we have one day, which is tomorrow before the set releases on Wednesday. Tomorrow's video is going to be like a preemptive sort of discussion about some of the stuff that's going to be coming in this new expansion, this new mini set. There's been a couple of additional cards leaked that I actually haven't talked about on the channel yet, because I wasn't sure if they were like real or not. But it seemingly they are coming and they are real, so there's some more to talk about. That'll be in tomorrow's video. If anyone's curious about a particular rodent EX Pokemon that you might have seen, but stay tuned for that. Anyway, shout out to Dr. Indigo, very, very cool. Shout out to Vespiquen. And then here, Imp Yggdrasil, 3rd place. Yggdrasil is going to be Dark Hoopa. And again, guys, I think Dark Hoopa is the best deck in the game. I do. Now, but keep in mind, if you're playing Hoopa EX, Darkrai EX, and Mega Absol EX, there's a lot of EXs in there. It's going to be a little difficult to deal with Oricorio. Now, in most decks, again, in most scenarios, having Deceptive Needle and having Mega or Darkrai EX, like that additional damage every turn, like is enough to be able to KO a deck that just sort of throws an Oricorio or two in there. Right? Like it normally is, but when you're playing Starting Plains, when you're playing Indeedee EX, when you're playing Giant Capes, like it's not enough. Like you don't have enough damage, and that's the real strength of that Indeedee strategy with Oricorio, is that typical Oricorio counterplay doesn't work against it. It's too tanky, it's too bulky, it's got too much healing, it's incredibly toxic, and it really does kind of open up the opportunities for decks to certain decks that wouldn't be considered super strong but can deal with a strategy like that to be more in the forefront of the metagame. But yeah, throughout this season, I think Dark Koopa has been the strongest deck. It's had the best win rate, the best performances on average. It's not been the most popular strategy, but it certainly has been, in my mind, overall the most impressive deck. And I think Hoopa's insane. I think Hoopa's crazy, and it'll probably continue to be. It's just sort of what the Dark archetype is now. These Pokemon are so strong. Hoopa's crazy. Darkrai's crazy. Absol's really, really good in certain scenarios. And you have Deceptive Needle, you know, and at the end of the day, this is just a lucky Ice Pop deck, which nobody really likes, but these Pokemon really do utilize it quite well. So there you go. It's Dark Koopa. There's the code. I don't think it's really worth playing like anything that's I don't like. What would you play in this deck? I don't really know. Certain decks just are not built to deal with Oricorio, you know what I mean? And certain decks are, right? And typically, like I just said, the decks that can deal with Oricorio are on paper less strong in general than the decks that typically can't, which again is why Oricorio is such a valuable card to the health of the metagame. It balances things out retroactively, which I think is a really big deal. But anyway, there you go. Hoopa, Dark Hoopa, super good. I mean, it's so good. Eloquitas here in 4th place, Sleep Altaria. So again, you know, when you take a look at top 4 and you look at these decks, you're like, okay, so we have Bad Dreams Altaria and we have Indeedee Dedenne, which are two of like the hard counter strategies in the game. Right? Like you have to account for things like this if you're looking to, you know, win a tournament, because if you hit one in a best of 3, you know, a single elimination bracket, if you don't have Ogerpon, if you don't have PCL, if you don't have, you know, evolution Pokemon, if you don't have non-EX things, like there's certain decks that you run into them, even though in general on paper, they're not that strong. They're not that impressive. If you're not prepared for them, you know, they are quite strong. And I think most decks, it really since Sleep Altaria became popular, have accounted for the status conditions and the sleep effects, which is why Sleep Altaria really hasn't been that dominant of a deck for like the last couple of months. But you know, this particular weekend, you know, maybe not that many people accounting for it or counterplaying it, right? Which is why it comes in here and ends up being very effective, making it into top 4, but also 5th place. Now, again, not much to say about these decks. Sleep Altaria has not changed too much. Really ever. It's still exactly what it, you know, always has been, but it's still strong. And again, if it runs into matchups that aren't prepared for it, it can easily win. I mean, Altaria is strong. It is unfortunate that Omega Altaria has been just sort of it's all just been sleep. Like they used to be one of the more flexible creative archetypes in the game, and now it's kind of the opposite. And I find that to be a bit unfortunate, but it is an effective strategy, especially given particular times, you know, in the season where people aren't prepared for it. There's the code if you want to play Sleep Altaria. I don't know why you would, but there you go. I'm sure there's a lot of this on ranked still. I haven't been playing too much ranked this week per se, but yeah, I assume Sleep Altaria, you know, is always somewhat popular. Less so maybe than else. Like, I don't think it's nearly the default deck it was in previous seasons. I think that's definitely been Lucario this season, but there you go. And then here, let's just take a look at Viltrum Dexter Morgan's version of this. I assume this is probably the same. I think this might be the exact same. I kind of forget. They're also only playing one Mega Altaria, which is so funny because they completely just resorted to this not really being an Altaria deck. It's just sort of a Bad Dreams deck with an Altaria thrown in, which again is fine. You know, I mean, you know, what works, right? There's the code. This might be the exact same deck, but here's the code for the other 5th place Sleep Altaria deck. What do you guys think about this? I'm curious. I do think Bad Dreams has a ton of potential next season. The Igglybuff to Arcrai stuff is likely going to be a pretty big factor next season, but we'll talk about that in tomorrow's video because I got a lot of thoughts. And next up is going to be Batty Too Sick. Batty Too Sick. From Great Britain, and this is Charizard. I love seeing Charizard in the standings. It's definitely one of the more ethical, sort of straightforward decks that if there was a new player coming to Pokemon Pocket, I would say, hey, listen, like, play this deck. Like, play this deck, learn the game, and then, you know, just sort of get your bearings. I think this deck has been upgraded, and I really do like it. I think that, you know, Entei into Charizard getting backed up by Flame Patch, Ignition Charmeleon, Rainbow Cave, and Wally means that this deck list from an energy perspective is, in fact, very, very, very consistent. You're almost never playing this deck in a scenario where you're like, oh, like I don't have the energies that I need. Sure, it happens sometimes, but very rarely. I mean, there's so many extra energies on board here. You basically are running 4 extra energies in your deck, 5 with Wally, so that's always a big upside. Now, you're still playing a Stage 2 Pokemon with no rare candy. It's still relatively a slower deck, but check this out. check out the non-EX Charizard thrown in here. This is one of the few examples of a non-EX Pokemon that can, in fact, KO not only Oricorio, but other EX Pokemon. This Charizard is a very unique example, and I think is actually a pretty strong upside. I'm not surprised that people are starting to play this because it is, in fact, just a strong option, and I do like that. So there you go. Mega Charizard, Entei. Shout out to Wally and Rainbow Cave. It's a really cool deck. We need to pull up the code. There you go. There's the code for Mega Charizard. It's a deck that I really do hope stays around. Now, again, we'll get into it tomorrow. There's some stuff coming that is, I think, genuinely speaking, is probably the most toxic stuff we've ever gotten added to Pokemon Pocket. No surprise it's coming in the Team Rocket set, but trust me, people are not going to have a lot of fun with certain things next season, or they will. I don't know. We'll see. Crimson Ruby here, 7th place, and this is going to be Mega Sceptile, which is actually, I would say, the more popular version of Mega Sceptile right now, and I did talk about this on Friday. I mean, when you're playing Butterfree and you're playing Caterpie, like, you can kind of feel pretty confident into a lot of different stuff, whether that is, the Dark-type decks, whether that is maybe the Oricorio-type decks, you feel, like, pretty good about it. Now, the thing about Butterfree is it heals, I think, 20 or 30 damage after you attack, but it only hits for 60, okay? Which does bring up a pretty significant issue when you match up into, the Oricorio and Didi stuff, which is that, they're healing for a lot. And you're healing too, but again, they could also just go into their Dedenne and then KO you, right? And then so it's the same type of thing when you would play Oricorio Magnezone, which was like, sure, like, I can get through the Oricorio, but if they go into Magnezone and then KO my Oricorio counter, like, I can't do anything. So it's a very unique situation. I am surprised. I would have thought that a deck like this might have been able to do a bit better into Oricorio, just in my own personal opinion. But again, maybe the double and DD Oricorio stuff just is a bit too much. I mean, Oricorio does hit for 50 damage every turn, which is pretty substantial, I would say. But anyway, yeah, I really like it. And again, it's really consistent. This is one of those decks that feels very grass type, and that's why I really like it. You're playing Quick Growth Caterpie, you're playing Quick Growth Extract, you got Leaf Cape, you got Fragrant Forest, you have Erica. I mean, this entire deck is built around being a grass type deck, which I think is really, really cool. And again, I always say it, but grass has some of the best support in the entire game with a lot of these cards. Hyper consistent, it's a mostly single prize archetype, which I really, really love. And this deck has a lot of identity to me, and I really like it in that sense. 8-2-1 record, Crimson Ruby. There's the code. A deck that I did recommend for this last week of Ranked, and I think this is definitely a very solid choice, given really anything else in the metagame right now. I actually quite like it. I do. I think I feel strongly that this is one of my favorite decks to be playing currently at the end of the season. Now, there's only like 1 day left of Ranked, but next up is Imp Brandon, and lastly is the deck we're going to take a look at in 8th place, and it is Mega Lucario. Now, this is going to be, kind of a reversion, I would say, back from what we were seeing in the earlier season. Not a bad thing. It's just Mega Lucario's got a lot of different nuances to it. There's a ton of different fighting cards that you can play in Mega Lucario. Now, to me, I personally think that for the most part, Mega Lucario is like 90% the same no matter what you're playing, because, you're playing Mega Lucario, you're playing Arena of Antiquity, you're playing Karina. So it's like, it's all about finishing the game by 1-hit KOing things. That card at the end there is 1 X speed. And went 8-3, Imp Brandon did. We got the Bonsly in here. We got the Hitmontop for some bench damage split. Again, there's nothing in here. I say this confidently. There's really nothing in here other than Fighting Coach Lucario, which is going to be able to stand up to that Indeedee deck with the healing and the starting planes and the Indeedees. Like, Hitmontop's not really going to do it, and then Bonsly's not really going to do it either. It might actually. Bonsly could probably stand up fairly well. But then again, Lucario here does 40 plus 20 for weakness, but also Fighting Coach means it does plus 40. So it's 80 damage onto an Oricorio, which is significant, right? If they don't have Giant Cape or starting planes in play. So it can take that KO. But again, if they go into Dedenne, they KO it, then they can kind of just win the game. So, you have to build Lucario a bit specifically. Again, it's just such a weird, it's a different thing. It's a completely different type of Oricorio deck. Most decks that play these sort of, non-EX Pokemon, they're usually like basic Pokemon or baby Pokemon or things like, Mega Lucarios, I guess, or just the Fighting Coach Lucario is a different example. But again, most decks are just playing Pokemon that cannot deal with Oricorio when it's backed up by the Indeedee stuff. So I don't know if this player ended up losing. I don't know if Brendan was the one that lost to the Dedenne player in grand finals, but Yeah, interesting to note. But this is kind of a throwback to what we were seeing at the beginning of the season. Mega Lucario here. This is like one of Lucario. Did Lucario win a tournament this season? I don't remember if Lucario won any of the PMPT tournaments, because I remember it being like double Vespiquen, but Lucario might have won one of those. It might have won last week, actually. I say that, but it might have just won last week. I'm sure it did. It was definitely one of the most successful decks this season, by far the most played deck this season. So, the way I categorize decks is not just based on popularity or how many total tournaments they win, but just around like how well it performs on average. And Lucario is certainly one of the top 5 strongest, like best decks this season, but it's been by far the most popular deck. It's like the default meta deck this season. So it's definitely had a lot of results. So very impressive. I do think Lucario won last season. I think I'm just crazy. And I just forget things very easily. But anyway, there you go. Shout out to Imp Brendan. Congrats, man. And yeah, so any of those decks from 9th place to 16th place, definitely, go to PocketMats.com. You can check out these decks yourselves, as well as decks from really any other tournament. We have all of the data that you could ever want for Pokemon Pocket, all of the deck lists, all of the QR codes. It's all on PocketMats.com, so go check it out. We don't have time to cover them today, but what I will do is quickly go over the metagame data, which is my favorite thing to do at the end of these videos here, because again, it's nice to have the full context. I know the season is wrapping up, but this is the reality of the game as it is. Or as it was rather this past weekend. So 292 players, 101 different types of decks, 1,600 games played, and the most played archetype was, in fact, Mega Lucario at about 11%. Now, for those of you who don't really know, I would say 11% is pretty low. Like, as far as, the most popular deck goes at any given time, being close to 10% is pretty tame. Now, it is definitely more popular than anything else right now in the metagame, because, again, it is that default deck, but we used to see the number one most played decks being 20 to 25%. And as in general, Pokemon Pocket's metagame these days is much more spread out. So 11% isn't anything too crazy. It's just because that's Mega Lucario is the most popular deck this season. Second was, in fact, actually Sleep Altaria. So there might have been a tournament win for Sleep Altaria, prior to this weekend. So definitely a massive surge in popularity, 6.2%. And as we saw, very popular and very well represented in top 16. Vespiquen here, just under 6%. The third most played deck, Hydreigon, rising up in play to 5.5%. So the fourth most played deck, and Charizard sitting at the 5th most played deck. And in fact, it was Mega Rayquaza still sitting as the 6th most played deck at 6.5% meta. And Dark Hoopa all the way down is the 7th most played deck this weekend, tied actually for Mega Rayquaza and Suicune, which is crazy, which also was 3.4%. So very interesting for sure. But anyway, if we take a look at the average win rates of the decks this weekend, you'll see that Sleep Altaria was by far the best performing deck throughout the tournament with a 63.7% win rate. So an incredible weekend to be playing Sleep Altaria. Most of the other players just really weren't prepared to deal with it. And in second place is actually Dark Hoopa. Continues to be incredible, a 58% win rate. And Hydreigon with a 55% win rate as well. Very impressive. Suicune Excalibur, 54%, and Vespiquen at 53%. Everything else that was popular, Mega Lucario only had a 44% win rate, Charizard 44%, Mega Rayquaza struggling tremendously this weekend at 35%. So out of the 8 most played decks, these were the 4 that were actually kind of what I would consider to be the correct choices, or 5 rather, where you have Altaria, Hoopa, Hydreigon, Suicune, and Vespiquen. So it's interesting how that works out, right? The most played deck had a much lower win rate. It just wasn't that well positioned. And again, it was more of a counterplay meta with things like Altaria, which is pretty cool. Now, which decks had the best day 2 conversion rate, meaning which decks were the best or most well-positioned into the greater field? This data here is very important, and it's really relative to determining which decks you might want to play for ranked battles, right? And here we see Sleep Altaria still number 1, and Hydreigon jumping up to number 2, Hoopa number 3, Suicune number 4. So again, given the entire breadth of the metagame, just being in day 1, meaning Swiss rounds, these are the decks that had the best win rates, right? Which is similar to this, to be fair. It's very similar. But in general, Hoopa did better in Top Cut than Hydreigon did. But Hydreigon did, a little better than Hoopa did in day 1. That's really all that's saying. And Lucario and Charizard and Mega Rayquaza, just not really great options, realistically, at least for day 1 in Swiss. Now let's look at this. Top 8 card inclusions. Sabrina jumping way up. 63% of top 8 decks were in fact playing Sabrina, which is an interesting thing. You got to remember back not that long ago, like almost no decks were playing Sabrina. And same with Field Blower. 63% of top 8 decks were playing Field Blower. Starting Plains, a little bit more representation. Trading Area because of, Mega Altaria, and Small Balloon seeing some play as well, and Fragrant Forest as well. So that's the big thing to me. Field Blower and Sabrina are seemingly the most flexible sort of tech inclusions, right? I would say that it's interesting because they don't list Cyrus on here, but I guarantee you it's just, the thing is every deck plays Cyrus, so it's not really a tech card. But yeah, Sabrina and Field Blower are kind of the consummate 19th and 20th cards for most decks in Pokemon Pocket, which is interesting for sure. But again, very limited deck space in general, which is kind of cool. And here's the matchup chart. I'm not going to go into this in great detail, but just know that Mega Altaria had a great win rate. It struggled a little bit into Vespiquen, probably because of Ogerpon, and then it struggled deeply into Hoopa, which makes sense because Hoopa's so broken with the bench damage and whatnot, and all of those Pokemon live a hit from Mega Altaria. So a 13% win rate into Dark Hoopa, that's a really big thing to note, that Dark Hoopa continues to be just really strong into Sleep Altaria, which is a big deal. But into Lucario, into Hydreigon, into Charizard, into Mega Rayquaza, into Suicune, it in fact had a very good win rate. So an incredible weekend, truthfully, for Mega Altaria. And Vespiquen continues to be very well positioned into the greater metagame. Unfortunately, it just hard loses to Lucario. Hydreigon, I don't even know really why people would play this. It didn't seem that well positioned. Have a decent, chance. It probably just beat all of the top tier meta decks. Charizard, not very good. It does beat Lucario, though. So this is one of those hard, just Lucario counterplay decks. Suicune as well, a really good matchup into Lucario. So, as you'll notice, some decks that most people would consider to be not that, significant this season are seeing a bit more play at the end of the season because of their matchup specifically into Mega Lucario. Sleep Altaria, 76%. Charizard, 86%. Even Suicune Excalibur, 63%. So, these are decks that, have found their home here at late this season because they can just beat Lucario. And that's what the metagame is about, right? When most of the tournament is playing Mega Lucario, when it's really popular, it's going to get counterplayed. And there are a lot of counterplay options to Mega Lucario, which is why, being the best deck and not being the best deck is a little bit different. In fact, if you take a look at Mega Lucario's win rates across the other most popular decks, it loses to most of them pretty hard, which I find to be quite interesting. Everything else here, you can take a look at this data. It's a smaller sample size, so it's nothing to really be too concerned about. Suicune was also seemingly a pretty decent meta call. It was losing to Altaria and to Vespiquen and Dark Hoopa, but, into a lot of other things that actually had a really good win rate, which is pretty cool. But anyway, guys, there you go. That's the metagame data. We're going to wrap up this season. We're going to put a bow on it there. PMPT number 43. Ruler of the Skies was a very fun season, but guess what? It's about to be gone forever. In 2 days, it's over, and we got into the B4A season, and the Team Rocket stuff comes flying in. We will be live on Wednesday with the live stream for the set release. We'll also do our, what do we call it? Our set review. Once the entire set gets data mined or gets announced or gets leaked or gets, I guess, updated. So once that comes, we're going to do that. We're going to dive right into the best cards, the best decks, as we typically do. But stay tuned for tomorrow's video because there is some new news about some new cards that we need to talk about because there's a lot of crazy stuff that is going to be coming. Guaranteed, I think, to be coming at this point, which is exciting. So stay tuned for that. But anyway, guys, let's get out of here. Peace out. Have a good one. We'll see you guys next time. And yeah. Bye.